All right. That is the right energy. We do not have dull moments in this space. Now, I want y'all to take 1 minute because you are going to be, of course, quietly listening. But I want y'all to appreciate where you are. You may have a name tag like you're at a conference. This isn't a conference like that. This isn't a conference like that. So let me reorient you to where you are. Okay? First of all, you're at the Franklinton Center at the Bricks. That's right. That's right. That's right. And let me tell you why you're here. One, because Mama Naima would never let us be anywhere else for the summit. And I'm too old for a butt whooping. I know I'm not, and I would like to prevent that from happening because I'm too old to be seen bent over somebody's knee. Now, we are here because this is a place where history was made. We are here most importantly today because history always tries to get erased. Abolitionist history always tries. They try to erase that piece. We're here because this is where it happened, okay? We are here because this was once a plantation. And when the Estes plantation was lost, a white widow from New York got this place and gave it over to make it a center for Black education. Since 1895, this has been a space not only for abolitionist thinking and the grounds, this is why they chose this spot, because this is where people met to talk about an impossible dream of ending slavery. But they also met for this to be the training ground to educate people so that they did not continue an oppression of the mind. Because that was also the next battlefield. If this was 1895, so Reconstruction is ending. We have Black congressmen in North Carolina. And all of that is trying to be stripped away. So at this moment, these walls were created as a resistance, not just to slavery, not just to the Civil War, but to the end of Reconstruction, the start of Jim Crow. So that we will have a space where we know our children can be educated, where we know that we can set liberation as the priority, because we're not going back. We are not going back. And so it's important that every year we come here to remind ourselves we're not going back. And so that for our summit theme this year is we are still here. We are still here. The North Carolina Environmental Justice Network is still here. We will still say these words in these halls. And this is the space where you are free to say them. Now, education has always been a center point. It's a battleground because what you say, the misinformation, what you pass on to the next generation is where folks will go. We're at another moment, where people are trying to determine what we can teach, who can teach, and what they learn. And so I urge you, while you are here, to soak in the energy of this space. Because we are not the only ones, we are not the only generation, this is not the only time in which we have had to confront that issue. This is just our moment in the present. But people have overcome that issue over and over and over again. And the Franklinton Center at the Bricks has been able to tell that story and hold that memory strong. So we come here to remember. We come here to learn. We come here to accept the learnings from the past and the present. And of course, to expand and vision the future that we want. Because it is possible. No matter how grim it may seem, coming back here reminds us people have survived unimaginable things. More than what they wrote down at the time. But they still built these walls. They still got their children here. They sent them to this boarding school with nothing. Franklinton Center opened up their doors with children with nothing. They said, you can go tuition free and you can work this land and help us keep these doors open, because we know that the education for everyone is the most important thing. That wasn't from the government. They didn't get government funding. They did it because they knew that they must. And now's our time. We must. Hello, my name is Dr. Chris Lamont Brown.
Are you with me today? Are you with me today?
Good. This space is a teacher. So while you're here, walk the grounds. While you're here, soak it up. While you're here, read the signs. While you're here, go to the museum. Out these doors, down the hall, and to the right. Remember what we fought for. Remember how all the things we have, we had to scrape by to get. My role here at the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network is a co-director. My focus is research and education. And my babies just walked in the door. Hold on. Say hi to Maya and Waya, the little one. All right. Now we can really get started. Okay. What we teach and what we show, what we prove, will always be contested and always has been contested. So as a researcher, as an educator, it is my challenge to all of you to make sure that what we are educating, we hold firm on the truth. That is our goal, to get reoriented, because we're being pushed. We're being pushed off that. And so we're here to get recentered and regrounded. Unfortunately, today I have some wonderful panelists who have been able to show how we can use research and education for communities, to support community work and to support environmental justice right here in North Carolina. So I'd love to welcome our 4 panelists to come on up. So that's Richard Leek from the Concerned Citizens of West Baden. And Dr. Nancy Lauer, there we go, from the Duke Law and Policy Clinic. Mr. Mitchell, where you at? Oh, there we go. From REACH over in Duplin County. And Dr. Chris Heaney, coming all the way from Johns Hopkins University. All right, go ahead. Have a seat. Yes, keep that hype up. Because absolutely research belongs in the movement. That's right, because we need to document the movement. We need to be able to advance the movement and use research as a tool, use education as a tool. And these are folks who've been able to do that. Oh yeah, do that well. But yeah, let's scooch. Mm-hmm. And this is what a democratic education looks like when we use the tools of education and research for the people, for the cause. All right, so I'm going to have our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. Richard, could you start off, and this will be a quick introduction. You'll be able to talk more about each issue as well a little bit later. So start off with that.
My name is Richard Lee.
Oh wait, hold on. Let me make sure we get this.
Thank you again. My name is Richard Lee. I'm with the Concerned Citizens of West Baden, where we are fighting against big and corporate about hazardous waste in our community.
My name is Nancy Lauer. I'm a staff scientist with the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic. I personally have been working on issues related to Baden since 2018, and our clinic has been working on issues related to Baden for over the last decade.
Thank you all. My name is Leroy Mitchell. I am a research technician for REACH, Rural Empowerment for Community Health in Duplin County.
Yeah.
You brought the people on the bus, right?
Yeah.
That's great. I'm Chris Heaney. I'm in Baltimore at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and drove down today with some people from our group. We have a community science initiative for environmental justice that we started up there that came out of a Steve Wing legacy initiative planning process that happened right here in 2019.
What? Great. All right, thank you. So, Mr. Mitchell and Richard, I'm going to start off with y'all. Can you tell us more about the concerns your community had that led to starting to do research?
Yeah. I work with REACH, which is located in Duplin County, but not necessarily Duplin County is the only place we interact. We are with the concerned citizens for the CAFO in and around that area. Confined animal feeding operation, which is the poultry, the turkey, and the chickens. Their feeding, their waste, their expulsion of the waste, and everything concerned in and around Duplin, Sampson, Johnson, Lenore, and areas there around.
I represent the community of West Baden, where some years ago I noticed that most of the employees, the guys that I work with, were dying with cancer. After a survey of our workplace, I found out that a lot of the waste that we had dumped in the black community was hazardous material. And in the process of finding out that it was hazardous material, I did a survey where I found out that 85% of the guys that I worked with died with some form of cancer. Another 75% of the individuals that live behind that plant that has never been inside had some form of cancer. 40 to 42%, most of the black women that live in that community also have some form of cancer. I got involved because I was a part of that process. My job was to haul hazardous waste outside the plant and dump it in my community. And in the process of me doing that, we were illiterate to the fact that, you know, we didn't know what type of chemicals we were using. We didn't know what the outcome or the exposure part of the chemicals that we dumped in the landfill. And after I became aware of what was going on through doing some time I had spent in the medical office, I had opportunity to look at some of the guys' medical files, and I saw where the aluminum company that I worked for had lied about how they died. Some of them they had wrote up in their medical report that they had died from emphysema, and that was because they knew that they smoked. We never knew that asbestos caused cancer. We never knew that fluoride caused cancer because nobody had never explained those situations to us or that type of stuff to us. The only thing that we knew were that we were going to work, thought we had a pretty good paying job, and we were only interested in having that good paying job, not realizing that we were selling out a way of life for a way of life that wasn't productive for us.
Now, for the two of you again, you had these really complicated issues that had major resistance from corporations. You know, so both in terms of Smithfield, Murphy Brown, and then Alcoa, you were facing these giants. What were you hoping to get from starting your research?
Well, again, as you added Smithfield, Murphy Brown, things of that nature that furnish the feed for these CAFOs. One thing about Duplin County, you don't have to ask what the problem is. It introduces itself to you. And what I mean by that is once you hit Duplin County, you recognize the smell in the air has changed. Not only that, you won't travel too far without passing a feed truck, a chicken truck that's hauling the animals to the processing plant or returning, what they call a dead truck that hauls the dead animals away from the operation, and the turkeys. So that's one of the major incomes in that county, but not necessarily for the people that live there. There are a few that work in this process, but right now it's been taken over by others. And we all know who the others are. Not that their lives doesn't matter either, not that their living doesn't matter, because that's one thing about REACH. We're concerned about the health of the county. It doesn't matter who you are. As long as you're in Duplin, Sampson, Wayne, we all invite everybody to the table. Because the air doesn't know any boundaries, the air doesn't know any color, the water doesn't know any boundaries or color. So I don't know how they expect to live if they contaminate it, because we all got to drink the same water. We all smell the same air. So is it worth the profit that you make? That's the question they have to ask themselves. And we also learned through involvement through some of the contract growers, that's not necessarily what they want, but they're locked into a system that they can't do anything about. So where are we at? We are left with finding data, research, to determine what the factors are in the air that we smell. And that's the things we concentrate on at REACH. We communicate with our community partners, our neighborhood, but we act on their behalf. And what I mean by that is we'll investigate anybody's concern, no matter how big or how small. For those of you that may be Trekkies like me, I'm first contact. And those of you that may not, I'm boots on the ground. That means I'm there whenever they call to find out what the problem is, to assess it, and see if there's any help that we can give. And a lot of times, it's just as simple as somebody showing concern for what's going on. Somebody wants to know why it is that I can't go outside and grill like I used to. I can't hang my clothes on the line. I can't even open my window to get fresh air. I have many horror stories that I could share with you, but this may not be the time and the place, and you may not have that much time. But know that we are concerned with our community. We are doing the things that we are able to do to aid them in any way we possibly can.
And actually, I'm going to kick it over to Chris, and then I'll give it over to the pair of you. And Chris, if you could focus on, okay, so Mr. Mitchell laid out, the goal has been to figure out what's going on in the air. That was the mission. How did you try to fulfill that need? What was your approach?
Sure. So I think many people are familiar with the body of scientific work that Steve Wing pushed forward that helped support the nuisance lawsuits against Smithfield, right?
Wait, hold on. Raise your hand if you're familiar with that, what he just referenced. We got new generations in the audience too, so you might need a...
So with what Mr. Mitchell said and what Elsie Heaney said, you have to go to the front door and negotiate with whether the air is going to let you go outside, right? Steve's studies and a lot of people around the room, David Leith, Marianne Boundy, the Air Lab teamed up, Amy Lohman, Courtney, on and on, a lot of people helped give answers about that. But at that time, it was dialed in on swine, the concentration and the explosion of swine CAFOs in the state. What I think was really hard, many people in this room worked tirelessly to point out, is that poultry CAFOs were silently and in a hidden way growing and exploding as well. So I think the complexity of the issue when I came in and was seeing the community health effects of hog operations, CHEO study, deliver what it delivered for the nuisance lawsuits, which we know how that story ended. Industry calling the General Assembly and changing state laws so that you can no longer sue agricultural producers for nuisance in this state, right? That's the context, right? Turning the clock back, and we got to hold it. But now you had a recognition from Mr. Mitchell, Devon, the water keepers, everybody sounding the alarm about what does it mean for people's health now that poultry and CAFO are co-located. And if the swine CAFO lagoon and sprayfield moratorium is made permanent and held ground, how can the agricultural economy of North Carolina expand and show growth in a capitalist system? Well, producers were offered the opportunity to sign a contract if they've been grown Prestige or Smithfield hogs to grow butterball turkeys on the same property. So I think a lot of this now is, what does it mean? Has it gotten worse? Has the air pollution, and can we deliver data around these things that we in academic institutions are not the first to know? It's the boots on the ground. What's the Trekkie? First contact. So scientists are here, and what's the career message we get coming through the academic ranks? Know your program officer at a federal funding institution to develop your career. They are a client. They have questions. They have priorities. But for community-driven, community-owned and managed research, there is no change in objectivity to any scientific enterprise you go down the other side for the Trekkie. If the client is the community and not your program officer, saying these should be the research questions that we prioritize, this is what we need to investigate, and this is what we need to answer. So it's gotten more, I believe, I would hypothesize, it's gotten more acute and more problematic with the concentration and co-location of poultry and swine. Now we've got the Smithfield Agreement putting forward environmentally superior technologies with biogas and billboards that say CAFOs are not dirty, they're clean and they're green and they're climate solutions. So I think that's another part of what we've been grappling with, is how do you continue, if the game is, going back to tobacco, y'all, going back way long, doubt is their product. What was it, from unfiltered to putting filters on, right? From, all of the, what's the burden of proof around leaded gasoline and everything. And a lot of the marketing companies and the consulting firms that help guide industry through, get as much profit out as you can before the evidence catches up. I think that's the game we're in now with biogas. And so boots on the ground, I think, is where we are and what we need to be doing, and building the science around what people see in their backyards. Because it's pipelines, y'all. At least in the past, I think CAFO country didn't worry that CAFOs were going to blow up when storms come through. So now I think there's a real need for some answers about what does it mean to have a methane factory in my backyard that is, I can't sue, because every other methane facility around the country, if you're near a fossil fuel fence line neighbor, you think you'd have the right to sue for cancer or hazardous waste. But in North Carolina, this energy industry, when it comes to lawsuits, is agriculture. So we got a real big issue here where often science is not the thing, but having objective questions where community sets the table lawyers come to the table, other technical experts, engineer, agriculture, and public health and other medical sciences come to the table. I think that's the table I saw Steve Winks at over and over and over again, and try to be a participant at the table and figure out what questions do the community need answered, and can my positionality help facilitate getting, if resources are needed, to be able to get some real rigorous questions that could, I don't know, replay the nuisance lawsuits again, but maybe it's around other issues that our brilliant lawyers and the communities are gonna identify where we can bring some relief.
Do you remember the question? I'm only asking because I have to remind myself, so I'm like making it fair. Do you remember? Or when you started out, what were you hoping to use research for? What could you see? What did you think, given the issue that you had, how could you use research?
That's a real easy question to answer about the research. Like I said, when we found out that we had a high rate of cancer within the job site and in our community, we realized that we had a problem. And in the process of us realizing that we had a problem, we took it to the community. And once we took it to the community, there were a lot of things that I don't think were understood, because we started out trying to explain to them the type of chemicals that we use on the job and the type of chemicals that we had put in the ground, with the understanding that that justified what we were trying to tell them, not understanding that they didn't know the nature of those chemicals or what we were talking about, because over 75% of them had never been in that plant. So we were just speaking a foreign language to them when it came to talking about asbestos, aluminum fluoride, black coal tar pitch, and all these things that I'm called names that I'm calling cause cancer. And when we start talking about what was going on, Alcoa, which was my employer at that time, got the word of what was going on, what we were saying, and what we were trying to do, and then we got to be labeled as exaggerating about what we were saying, lying about what we said that we dumped in the ground. And my question had always been, and always will be, why would I tell you a lie about something that you hired me to do? You know, you hired me to do this. You know what I mean? At that time, if I didn't do what you said, then I wouldn't have had no job. Now, relating back to what you were saying about scientific knowledge, we didn't have the data or the scientific knowledge to prove nothing that we were saying, because we didn't know the nature of the chemicals. Only thing we knew that we found out that they do this or call this, but as far as being educated about it, we didn't know nothing. But I give the Most High his honors to Naima, which gave us a platform to stand up and introduce what was going on in our community, along with Mr. Steve Wilk. They gave us the first opportunity to stand up and tell what was going on in our community. And through their invitation, we were heard in some instincts. I'm also on the Yadkin River Keepers Board, where they deal with the lakes, the water, because I also worked on the lake too. And in the process of me working on the lake, I had opportunities to change oil in the transformer. At that particular time, it was just oil to me. I never knew what PCP were, what it called, what kind of damage it did to you. I never knew the type of cleaning fluid that we use to clean the gills and stuff inside of the generators, what it did to the human body. I had a job. My job was to use that stuff in order to keep the equipment running. And when I found out what was going on, and I found out the recreation part of the lake and how it was being used, I joined forces with Yadkin River Keeper to tell them about some of the hazardous material that we had dumped in the lake, or we had washed in the lake in the plant, or where we washed it down, stormwater drains and whatnot. We never knew nothing about outfalls and all that kind of stuff. We never knew that washing it in the lake, it went through different channels and floated to different parts of the lake, until we got involved with North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, with Duke Law. That was when we started realizing this thing was much more bigger than what we thought it were. And we partnered with individuals with air quality control, because a lot of dust particles coming outside of the plant, and we needed time to talk about those things. So there are a lot of things that through the network that we were able to pinpoint, and we're still working with them with the help of Duke Law Firm.
Do you remember? I gotta.
How are we fulfilling that research goal?
That's right.
Got it. So I'll start by saying the aluminum smelter, the former aluminum smelter that is located in Baden, has been managed by the state. The cleanup has been managed by the state for over 30 years now. And during this management of the site, the state has been doing several investigations to try to understand the nature of the contamination, what types of cleanup remedies should be implemented. And over the course of these 30 plus years, the state has not worked with the community and with the people who actually worked at the Alcoa facility and were ordered to dump that waste throughout the town, like Richard and the other members of the concerned citizens of West Baden. The state has been working with Alcoa for Alcoa to tell them where these tests should be done, what should be tested for. And it just seems so obvious to us coming in that the state is not tapping into the expertise of the people who know the most about where this contamination is and what the concerns are. And so when we started our research alongside the concerned citizens of West Baden and with Richard and Valerie, the other co-chair of the group, it seemed very obvious that we needed Richard and Valerie to tell us where these contaminants were, where waste was dumped. And so we started this process with a big participatory mapping session, which we'll all be talking about tomorrow afternoon, and so that'll be really exciting. But we use this participatory mapping tool to have the concerned citizens of West Baden show on a map all of the locations where they knew waste had been dumped, where they were concerned waste had been dumped, where they were concerned contamination had spread, in order to then inform a sampling plan. And every time now that we go out to do that sampling, soil sampling, sediment sampling, water sampling, we go with the community and tap into that expertise to understand, okay, this is, where Richard washed out the pots and the water flowed down this way. Because if I just went out there and looked, okay, I need to collect soil samples here, I wouldn't know what I'm looking at. It's really the community that has that on the ground, boots on the ground expertise, understanding of what happened at these sites that informs that research moving forward. And so that's largely what we have been doing over this last year or so, is working closely with Richard and the concerned citizens to do that sampling and get those answers to the questions of where is this contamination and what do we need to do about it.
Thank you. And for Richard and Mr. Mitchell, how have you been able to, y'all have been working with researchers for over 10 years at this point now. How have you been able to use the research for your advocacy?
I had the opportunity to attend Alcoa's quarterly meetings. And in the process of attending their quarterly meetings, it's always a discussion on where they are when it comes to how they are disposing of the hazardous waste that we're talking about. So it's just like we got their attention, through the testing that NASA knows are doing for us, through the air quality testing that we are doing. They are really questioning some of the things that we are doing, because they were saying that the equipment that they were using to test those areas that we're talking about wasn't as advanced as what we're using now. And even though they are looking at and accepting some of it, they are still questioning a lot of things because of the way that the equipment that NASA knows use compared to the outdated equipment that they have.
Nancy, anything you want to add?
I would also add that, you know, as this process has gone on, there's several permits that are related to this facility. So there's stormwater permits, there's hazardous waste permits, and what this research can really allow us to do is, when those permits come out, sort of inform our advocacy around those permits. Should they be more stringent? Are there chemicals of concern that those permits are not taking into account that we're concerned about? And in the next couple of years here, we're going to see the hazardous waste permit coming out, and I think that this research will allow us to sort of bring our own information to the table and not just have to rely on the tests that Alcoa is doing to be able to advocate for the most stringent permit possible.
I want to add on that, because I think you're both making really important points here, is that because of how industries and government agencies interact, is that really industries are letting our agencies know how much they're polluting, and there's a little bit of back and forth on that, but largely they don't, like DEQ does not have, the Department of Environmental Quality does not have the resources to be able to fact check everything that's said and everything that's done and everything that's reported by each of these industries, because as you all know, there are many throughout the state. And so to be able to provide other sources of the same thing is really important, to be able to counteract some of those narrative pieces, because otherwise that's not something that the state has the capacity to do.
One thing that I would add on to what's been said, that it evolves. The research evolves. Like you said, the Chale study, the way the industry revolves, we have to do likewise. And what I mean by that, one study we borrow from to help the next. One question that comes up because of the results of that study leads us to another avenue. We've gone from, like I said, from stationary equipment to mobile equipment, from mobile equipment back to stationary, because as they evolve from just the CAFO to the biodigesters, then we have to evolve so we can get a little bit more sensitive equipment closer to these areas to get the readings and the data that we need. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there's certain things that we have done through REACH, DHAB, and civic engagement, and asking the question of what's in your backyard. People volunteer this information because it's always changing, it's always moving. They're always looking to expand. Chris brought up the point about the moratorium on the hog farms. So before they get a moratorium on the chicken and the turkey, they're building all that they can. Yeah. But they've gotten wiser. They've gotten farther from the road where you can't see them. So you used to could see the top of the building, now you can't see anything. But when you go to a global satellite, you see they got 15 or 20 structures a half a mile off the road. They got little small cities. Right beyond REACH office, in a 7-mile span, there's 70 different buildings. And they're layered. You may run into the hog CAFOs, and then behind those are the turkey CAFOs, and behind those are the chicken CAFOs. It's all on their property. It's on property that they couldn't do anything else with, but they were financed to develop this so they can keep producing these things. So the research has to change in order to collect the data that's necessary. And that's what we have learned going forward. And we're always trying to come up with new ideas, and a lot of them are brought forward by the people that attend these meetings that we have. They make suggestions, they don't even realize what they said. Mm-hmm. Little small things. Like, it started from a pair of gloves and evolved into a device that we can park for 30 days, 60 days. And they take minute readings that we couldn't ordinarily do with certain other equipment. So we have to do what we can and evolve with them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think along the community academic or community research partnership, because we've benefited so much from the participatory mapping that's going to be the session tomorrow. that Danny and Chris have taught us and brought us along with. So it doesn't matter if it's community or academic or community science organization, but it's what you learn because you're all just like a good investigative journalist, you know? You're like just paying attention to the dots, and then you're starting to see the connections, and you're sharing what connections you're seeing if you're community directed and community led with what I might be reading that is in my language that I can understand from a lawyer who sends me a permit document for pilot still, but the largest example of the swine CAFO biogas conditioning facility, which is going down I-40, I believe at Turkey and the Warsaw, West Wardsbridge Road, but going west, right? I think that's correct, right? It's just there. It's the Penny Branch Road facility. And when I see the permit from a lawyer, I'm reading that this facility, what did you say? The relationship between the regulatory agencies and the companies, there's that trust of assumptions that are, because there's not something to disprove it. Well, when I read something like there's a state air toxics rule for something like SO2, sulfur dioxide, that's essentially been an environmental health and air pollution problem that's been solved in this country, okay? It's not writ large on average across the country a problem. But this area, for this permit, to prove that it's not exceeding the SO2 state air toxics permit, it is literally one drop more. I'm just thinking about like a drop of extra SO2 pollution would put it up in violation of the state air toxics rule. Why is that? Because what that facility is doing is it's getting rid of the toxic, noxious hydrogen sulfide and other odorant gases because it needs to get those out in order to pipe methane out into the regional pipelines. You can't go from a capped swine CAFO lagoon, which is recovering methane, and taking that methane straight to a pipeline. You have to build what's over there on Penny Branch Lane Road, and you have to flare it and purify it. They call it conditioning. So when I see that as an environmental and occupational epidemiologist, my alarm bells go off, because when I read the level of hydrogen sulfide that has to be removed to get just under one drop where it would be violating the SO2, because the hydrogen sulfide gets converted into SO2, it's in the thousands of parts per million. That probably doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. Does anybody think it's the 1,000 parts per million hydrogen sulfide? Would you be worried? You may not know, like we're hearing down here. That, if a worker at that facility were at the wrong place and had an accidental emission, 1 second of breathing the emissions from that pipe would kill the worker on the spot. On the spot. This is in the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health Administration's guidance on hydrogen sulfide and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's worker hazard protection levels. Anybody want to guess what level it has to be cleaned down to from hydrogen sulfide to be allowed to go swine CAFO methane into the pipeline? If anybody from Duke who did these studies is here, they probably know. 2 parts per million. We're still in the million, okay? Steve Wing's studies with the CHEO that won all the nuisance lawsuits and showed all of these adverse health effects for neighbors. Want to guess what level the ambient hydrogen sulfide was there when neighbors? 20 to 200 parts per billion with a B, 1,000 times lower. So we've got what's in my backyard happening. Participatory mapping, people saying they're digging up and building pipelines. And I live near a CAFO that had a capped lagoon, and it's now a biodigester biomethane recovery. But I live between the CAFO and that pipeline that's going between my land. It hasn't gotten to the cleaning facility yet, like at Penny Branch Lane. So that means the piped, clean, green, beautiful methane from these swine CAFOs contains, crisscrossing through people's backyards, thousands of parts per million of hydrogen sulfide in it. There was an accident. All pipelines leak, I think the industry has admitted. If kids were playing in a backyard for a party and there was an accidental emission and they were close enough to that pipe, it could be catastrophic. And that's an environmental occupational epidemiologist educating you all about the hazards. That the industry, are they talking about this? No. You see billboards, it's clean. It's green. It has economic benefits. For whom? It's entrenchment of the injustices. It's not sharing information like you hear there that puts people's lives in danger and at risk. And that's the precursor of us doing our homework to even doing any research together.
You can. You got one? You got a burning one? Well, hold on. I'm going to give you this. I know that you're loud.
I am loud. So if I have pipelines near my backyard or coming through my backyard, can I barbecue?
That's a great question.
I live in the South.
Safety.
I like to eat.
Were you even involved, or was there eminent domain in obtaining the easement for the pipeline to be proximal to your property or to potentially cross your property? That's another, I think, thing that we're learning, and maybe Mr. Mitchell, I'll pass it off to you about that.
Do you even know it's back there?
No, I'm just asking a general
For-
question. I don't know.
A lot of times, see, this is something that we have to address. Like I said, when I'm boots on the ground, the first thing I have to ask, do you own the property? See, if you don't own the property, you don't even have a choice.
But
if it's a leak, possibly. Because it is methane gas. And like you said, it's unclean.
And across the country where this technology is also taking off, part of the science and what this connecting the dots is, there have now been news coverage of facilities, individual swine CAFOs or dairy operations where there have been explosions, where tragically, and this is the ally I think we haven't really tapped into, are the contract growers between the rock and a hard place. There is a resilience, there's an independence, there's I can do this on my own. Everything that comes onto my property and my farm, I should be able to operate and fix. And this is complicated equipment, dangerous equipment, and there have been instances where farmer operators have gone in to try to fix a tank on the digester, or the covered lagoon has a problem, and they've died. They've just died because of the acute exposures to hydrogen. This is not being covered. It's not being talked about. And with that, I'm going to channel what Steve would tell to me. Why do we need research? Do we need more research? Or is it the communication and education around that? But I think the sad thing is that this is a Devon Hall. We do need the research. We need it to equip to us to go into debates and into battle.
I'm going to open things up for questions for everybody, because you're right, it is time. And so if anybody has a question, we'll pass around a mic to you. Anybody have questions for our panelists? You can borrow mine while we're getting the other ones. Will, could you hand it?
I've got lots of information about methane pipelines that are not biogas, and the rules and regulations about the coatings on the pipes and how they're hydrostatically tested with pumping it full of water and seeing if it leaks. But as far as I know, there are almost no regulations for these biogas pipelines, that you could almost use aluminum foil tubes and get it passed. Is that accurate?
I don't know. I do know in some of the conversations with the group at Duke, who initially did the pilot studies in cooperation with the State Division of Agronomic and Consumer Services, and I believe Google money. One of the problems that's been chronic with the methane that is the product, and let's just remind ourselves, there's a new product that has economic value that's coming out of these facilities, right? And all right, so just yeah. Every metallic fixture, pipe, connector, valve, there were chronic problems with corrosion because of the high levels of hydrogen sulfide and the way that it would erode the typical materials that you might pick to construct pipelines. And so I know that that has been a chronic problem, and nationwide, when you look at the trends of the different kind of adoption and waves of implementation of biodigesters, there is a track record and a trend of failed, no longer operating because the operational challenges and costs were too high related to corrosion and other maintenance issues that are highly complicated and highly technical. But I would love to talk to you after and learn more.
Other questions?
Mr. Richard Leak, you had mentioned that Alcoa had quarterly meetings where they, I'm guessing, invited the public to be able to speak. Do you believe that, are they still having those meetings, and are they open to the public, and do you think that, or other panelists, believe that that's a good blueprint for industries to be able to have these meetings open to the public, and is it well received when they get maybe not so great feedback from the community?
I heard what, I don't hear all of what you're saying. Repeat that question again, please.
The community advisory board meetings, do you think those are a good model for Alcoa to engage with you all?
In some instances, I do, because it gives us a broader understanding about a lot of the research that we are having done, because Alcoa don't always come out and elaborate on what we're doing, but some of the things that they say give me the intention that they know what we are talking about and what we are doing. And that's the purpose of the situation, is to get their attention. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at it through those channels.
And we got another, do you have anything else you want to, okay, go ahead.
So I'm hearing you guys say that a lot of the data comes from the community. So I'm wondering if there's any practices in place to, while you guys are collecting your data, are there any practices in place to protect those communities from further exploitation or being targeted for providing that data? How are we protecting those communities? And or how can we protect those communities?
Part of the question I just asked her is if you own your own property, we won't place any equipment in anybody's yard if they don't own it. So you don't have to answer to your landlord. You don't have to have an opportunity for getting evicted because you can't answer what it is and what it does. So you said that's some of the first things we do. We're not going to do anything to harm anybody or cause you any grief or any strife because we want to collect data. We want to work with you, not against you.
We ran across a similar point, like he just said earlier, where in some of the areas where we were testing, when Alcoa found out that we were testing in those areas, they put up no trespassing sign, put up fences to keep us out. And then we found out that individuals that had joint property that connected to Alcoa's property, they even put up boundaries to control our access through those individuals' property land because it joined onto their property. And once they put up the no trespassing sign, hey, we were prohibited to even cross in that area because they got it publicly announced that if you come on their property, they will prosecute you. So what we do, we try to keep from doing that. Now, we have got some individuals that own their property, and some of our core property runs into their property. Now, we can go on those individuals' property land and get samples that we need in order to test for certain things. But anything that's labeled, it's a no-no. Because if we cross those boundaries, then we automatically know that we're violating the law, and it's a known fact that we can be prosecuted.
And one other thing I'll add is that there is a structure at universities and some there are some independent institutional review boards or IRBs, which can help because under the research ethics principles, which are designed to protect people who participate in research studies, you can offer privacy and confidentiality. In other words, you would be able to offer the ability to volunteer to be in a study, but it would not be known or spoken of that you, as an individual, would be identified. Now, the industry knows this, and everybody knows the history of North Carolina. They tried to ask for the names of the participants in the studies that I mentioned earlier, deliberately as a tactic to try to intimidate people from ever doing something like that again, and organizing and doing research that could build power and change things. But that is one thing, is IRBs have been effective, whether it's hogs, whether it's water, worker retaliation, and intimidation, is that the academics in the room can play that role.
One more thing, reach principle is we don't tell anybody. If we place equipment in your yard, you can tell them, but we won't. We don't give anybody that information. We know where it is, and if you want to tell your neighbors, that's your prerogative, but we don't divulge that information.
In a similar vein, we consider any data that we collect to basically be owned by the concerned citizens of West Baden and Yadkin Riverkeeper, and any kind of dissemination of those results is entirely up to what they want to do with those results. And so we don't release those results to anyone besides them unless we have their permission, or following a intense conversation about the pros and cons of sharing those results outside of those groups.
I have a question.
And I would like to say this. In one of the areas where we were doing air quality testing, we had some individuals from DEQ to question the individual that we had doing the testing in our community and in our area. And the way that they got to that individual was, they said that, that they had talked with the concerned citizens of West Baden, and they were kind of like interested in what was going on, which was a tale, was a lie, really. And they gathered information from her that we didn't feel like should have been distributed. And at one of Alcor's quarterly meetings, it wasn't really just introduced what DEQ had pulled off on us, but they gave Alcor enough information for them to say that their testing procedures were not as strong as the ones that we had, and they advised the individual that were doing our testing that she had a limitation as far as the amount of knowledge that she could share with us about what the samples introduced. So I mean, it's a lot of stimulations in there, and when you start dealing with certain things, then like you said earlier, you got to follow the guidelines, because if you don't follow the guidelines, then if you ain't careful, you're headed for a lawsuit. And those big organizations, they won't hesitate to fight you back, because they know that we don't have the resources to fight them with, and they can use their money resources to overpower anything that we try to do. And we found that out firsthand.
I have a question. I've been coming here for years, and I've been hearing about West Baden. How many years have you all been involved in this, and do you think that you will see an end?
That's a good question. We've been at this for over going on 17 years. And in that 17-year span, it's been some disappointing time when it comes to answers that we feel like wasn't satisfactory. Some of the things that we found out that Alcor was allowed to do when they did their testing, we found out that they could do 3 samples and turn in their best samples, which we felt like at that time was a violation against the safety codes as far as DEQ was concerned. But in the end, anything hasn't been done, so we're still fighting them.
As far as your county commissioners or your mayor or the leaders in your community, how do you all deal with those people?
That's another good question. Most of the people in our community see Alcor as being this magic whistle. They said they did a lot of good things for the community, where they gave to the community and bought into the community with their gifts. So it's hard to really and truly get any kind of communication with the local government because they work hand in hand with Alcoa. Because you have to take under consideration our community is really and truly owned by Alcoa, and everything that we say represent us has to come through Alcoa. You know, because Alcoa supply them, and they feel like it's their duty to inform Alcoa on everything that's going on.
Election, and we've dealt with some of similar, I mean, not to that extent in Northampton County, and during the elections, twice we have voted out all our county commissioners and got a new group, and then when they came in and we found that things wasn't what they should be, and we, you know, getting ready next year in May to do the same thing. So have you all, yeah, I mean, you gotta get rid of them. If they not representing you, then, you know, you need to kind of let them go. And then I'm kind of in a position right now where I was at our NAACP banquet on Saturday night, and when I flipped the page over for the sponsors, one of them was in Viva, and you know, that's a pellet plant that we have in our community. So that's something else that, you know, we're getting ready to deal with, because you don't take from people that's destroying your community. You know, people can't, you know, breathe, they can't sleep at night for the noise 24/7. And then how are you gonna let them support something that you are doing in the community? And I, you know, I have a great problem with that, and I do intend to express it, you know, at the next meeting. But these are the things that we've dealt with. But, you know, as a community, we do come together, and, you know, we've been able to, in the past, vote out our commissioners and put in a new group. So, like I said, we got some that need to go now. That's what we're planning. So maybe you all need to get together and, you know, kind of look at it.
We have removed some of what we thought were the old problem and put in what we thought were new and better educated individuals, just to find out that those individuals that we thought better understood what we were talking about and what was going on had a good game when they were running on that platform. But after they got in office, we found out that it was just a talk and not a walk. So now we're dealing with that situation.
Can I ask a quick question? So to get services or to get equipment, I have to own my own property, so I can't rent it. Because, you know, a lot of people rent. That it just, everybody is not a landowner or a property owner. So I suffer twice. There's equipment and stuff out there that I can get, and there's help I can get. But if I'm renting, I think you said I can't get it.
That's right.
Well,
You have to have a deed that's deeded in your name, because they're saying because you're rented, you have certain property rights or certain rental rights. See, rental rights are different from property rights. You know,
But I still need to eat and drink the water and breathe the air.
If I may on this one, because we deal with this also, we also need to think about this collectively.
Yeah.
And so, because as a renter, one, you don't want to get in trouble with your landlord if you are pushing for some sort of change that would affect that. That's right. But it would help you live on. So think about also if you rally your neighborhood, and are there people that are right across the street or right next door that do own their own home that can give that permission and can help you give that information that doesn't put you at risk. So there's those things, like we can think about things collectively too. And we are running low on time, but this is I know we're having good discussion, so I want to keep, if we can keep our things short, we can squeeze people in. But I'm gonna also foreshadow what our next piece is, because after this we're gonna do breakouts where y'all, if you see the piece of paper on your tables, that's where y'all get to answer these questions, because what they are doing, I asked them here because they've been doing it for a long time, but if you haven't started, you can start today on what is your research question, what are the things that you want to know, and there are probably people in the room that can help you figure those things out and start developing your own piece. So we're saving some time for that, but I'll get you with this.
Hi, I'm Will Ingram from Richmond County Coalition for Justice and Black Empowerment, also a member of Black Workers for Justice. Mr. Leak, really familiar with Baden. We're right in Richmond County, which is right over next to where they are. A little brief history there was a question asked about Alcoa and the government and some of the officials. I'll just say Alcoa goes back and they have a really rich history there in Richmond County, or in Richmond and Montgomery County. A lot of the residents left from Richmond County and they actually moved there to work in the early 1900s. Alcoa went around in Baden Lake. You got to know the history. We got to know where we come from in order to know where we're going and why we're here right now. And Baden Lake, most of the property that was owned by most of those residents, they owned it. It was heirs property. A lot of those residents, just like where we are right now in Franklinton, a lot of them came out of the Civil War and they actually owned their property. So a lot of it became heirs property. Alcoa came through. Back then in the 1900s, money was not circulating. So since money wasn't circulating and farmers had to pay for their crops, they had to pay for their farms. Alcoa took advantage of that situation, and they came in and bought a lot of property up, including a lot of the historical indigenous sites that were located in where Alcoa sits at, as well as a lot of the dams were destroyed. And once they were destroyed, the land wasn't even used. So a lot of the people that sold their land during that time got pennies on the dollar, if that. And then a lot of them passed away from heartbreak. There's a lot of stories of a lot of the elderly folks passing away days after selling their land. So we have to understand why these companies are here, what they came here for, and why they're still sitting in the same locations, taking advantage of the same bloodlines and same family members who are still sitting here. And we're still sitting here for a fight, and we're willing to fight. That's why we're here. Get back to my question, which I think he answered, which about community health assessments, right? We can't depend on our local communities to do and hand out those community health assessments. So one thing I want to make sure we do before we leave is get in contact with you guys so that we can compare our data and what we have collected already. So thank you, Mr. Leak.
Good. And we're going to do one last question. Yo, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Keep your applause. You can do it.
Thanks for that. And I left an academic job to move into an advocacy job some years ago for a lot of reasons, but part is because I realized that research that's not connected with advocacy doesn't get it done. And so, Mr. Leak, 17 years is a mighty long time. And, you know, my own theory of change is you've got the information, you can make the case. What you need is more political power. So I simply want to pose to you and everyone in the room, how can any of us here as individuals, as representatives of organizations, help you and concerned citizens of West Baden community, and help you, Mr. Mitchell, with Rural Empowerment Association for Community Help? How can we help you build the political power you need to force decision makers to make smart environmental justice forward policy decisions?
There's only one answer, and that's through research. We have to approach them through research. Alcoa just ain't anybody. The same laws that they impose on us are the laws that they're using to do their wrong in our communities.
Well, to me, it's almost how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. What I mean by that is you have to get rid of, like you said, the old political structure to get some new blood in. But as long as they are selling you on the fact that it's jobs, 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 when you make those changes, then you got people afraid that they may lose that job. Like I said, if you go into Duplin County, you're going to pass a feed truck. You're going to pass a CAFO truck hauling to or from the processing plant. The people in the processing plant. Remember, we got hogs, turkeys, and chickens being processed in and around Duplin County. 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Trucks, feed trucks. So that's a lot of jobs. So even if they want to, they're afraid to. I'll put it that way. Change is not going to be easy and it's not going to be swift. So you have to attack it one step at a time. You have to move what you can move and realize, take one step forward and then strategize how to take the next. Because this wasn't done behind closed doors per se. It was organized, but it was put into place. And there's some people that had to look the other way. There's some people that had some envelopes passed to them and they knew what it represented, but they took it anyway. So all we can do is what we can do, but you can't stop. Reach is running a program right now called Civic Engagement. It's to try to get the people to go back to the churches and let's organize again. If we can get enough of them together and get it focused one step at a time, then we can begin to make a change. If you can change one, maybe you can frighten the rest, that they may be next on the list. Like Mr. Hall like to say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So that's my answer.
Well, I'll just add that, you know, I'm a researcher. I haven't left academia yet, right? But I don't know. I think my answer would be a little bit different. I don't think it would be necessarily the research. I think it'd be that we can answer a lot of questions together. Like, for example, we could answer, you know, you can answer whether people have indisputable evidence that the fecal filth of swine is trespassing on their property. And they don't raise swine. You know, they live on their homestead, like Elsie Herring did, and have a neighbor who's inundating their homes with swine waste. We can answer questions about whether that fecal waste is from chickens now, getting really good and close, or turkey, and distinguish possibly between the two of those. But it's like, what next in the power building? When is it enough? When is it outrageous enough that this is the system? And when would we find the allies in the coalition that says, you know, we have a right to property, right? We have a right to not have people trespass on our property. We have states where it's, you know, I'm allowed to take aggression at you if you trespass on my property. Right, but here's an industry that we could, through science, prove that they're trespassing on people's property. And so it's not just the research, but it's like the outrage that we can show it. And the residents and the workers are not wrong, but what do we do next? And I think that's the broader coalition, and maybe the question of lawyers and advocacy groups and, you know, nonprofits that are good at lobbying and all of those things, and really building a political and a popular movement.
I'll just quickly add to that over the years, the concerned citizens of West Baden have really built a comprehensive coalition to work at these issues. And so they partner with the Yadkin River Keeper and with SCLC and the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic and EJN and researchers at different universities. And so when things do come up with the Alcoa facility, there's a lot of people working to sort of be deployed at this very complex problem. And I think that coalition all working together at this problem is where we've seen incremental progress over the years resulting from those efforts.
Well, let's give our panelists a hand, everybody. And I think that's a great way to end things, because research is a part of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. It still comes down to collective action. And that is why our organization was formed, because our co-founders saw that we need lawyers, we need community advocates, we need people at all different levels, we need folks at the local level, we need folks at the state level, we need everybody to actually make change, because it's political will, it's documentation, it's advocacy, it's going to all these city council meetings, it's showing up in lobbying everywhere we go. So it does take all of us, and that is part of our mission, to be that connective tissue so that folks are staying informed. So I wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to Luma Kennedy, where's Luma? She is outside, but when you see her, I know you've read her newsletter, yes, and also with with Dr. Rania Masri putting that newsletter out, because we try to keep people informed about what's going on with each different community, because we do want to be able to plug in and tap in when things are picking up, because we can't be everywhere all at the same time. However, we can build the structures that we need. We do barn raisings, right? We can't all just individually focus on building our own thing, but when we need to, we can come around and help lift something up, okay? So that's what we're here for, to build these connections and strengthen out our network. So that's the job for all of us collectively, to keep boosting and keeping tabs on everybody here. So I'm gonna shift over to our breakout session. So your goal, this is your work time, to figure out what does your community need. So for folks, I want you to be able to, you can stay seated where you're at. If you want some air, take some air. There's lots of it outside. There's lots of spaces. But I want to make sure that there's somebody that's a community group and a researcher and advocate at every collection that you come up with, okay? So if you need help finding folks, let's start. If you are a community group, raise your hand. If you're representing a community group, raise your hand. All right, I'm going to let the rest of you sort it out, that if you're not raising your hand, go divide amongst yourselves. Community, stay put, because we center y'all. So go ahead and shift around, and then you can decide if you want to stay or go. All right? So community members, keep your hands up so people can find you.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Chris. What time are we coming back?
Oh, yeah, hold on 1 second. I forgot to tell y'all. You've got 20 minutes, so come back here at 3:20.